Started in about 2 or 3 minutes. I received a call from Professor Hester indicating that she had been delayed because of a personal issue. But since she's driving all the way from Shreveport, I thought it would be appropriate to give her those extra 2 minutes or so when she needs to get here. So we'll be starting in about 3 or 4 minutes from now. Stimulate your thinking. Uh, did you know that there is no recording of Super Bowl one, and why?
There was no recording.
That well, there is no existing recording full of the full game from Super Bowl one. Well, the game was the game was recorded by the network, but keep in mind that we didn't have the videotape recordings at that time. So people couldn't record them at home. And because those bulky recordings, I still don't understand this, but because they were so large, they got rid of them. I guess because in about a half of a year, you could have several rooms full of those huge recordings. And so as a practice, they got rid of it. And by the way, Super Bowl I was recorded by two networks. I mean, it was shown on two networks, CBS and NBC. That's right, NBC and CBS. So we tend to forget about that when we think about all of the modern day conveniences we have. But we've gone through the VHS, through the CD, and now everything is completely digital. So we don't even think about that. But at one time there was no way of catching the game at home. You have a comment, Attorney Castillo?
I just thought you were about to tell us that we would not be able to record a meeting.
Oh, so that should have been leading somewhere, I guess. You gave us one. We'll just delay the calling of the roll, but I do want to introduce two members who were not here before we actually begin the meeting. So why don't I go ahead and call the meeting to order, and then the first item on the agenda is going to be the introduction of the two members who were not here before. Professor Mills over to my right. Would you go ahead? Tell us a little about yourself.
My name is Chester Mills. I'm president of the I'm sorry, is this thing on?
Yes, it's on now.
President of the Faculty Senate at Southern University at New Orleans. I am there an associate professor of English and foreign languages. And I guess that's all I can say about myself, unless you really want something. I'll go over more. But that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Diamond, now, I apologize because everything I sent to you got kicked back because of some kind of, well, assistant didn't recognize the email, so you probably didn't get anything from me, and I think that's been corrected now. Is that right? Okay, good. Well, I'll go ahead, please.
Greetings. I am Dominique Diamond, a senior education major from Kenwood, Louisiana, and I serve as the Student Government Association President at Southern University in Agriculture and Mechanical College.
Thank you. Well, we will proceed with item 3 on the agenda, which is the approval of the agenda. And at this point, if there's anything that any member of the committee wants to add, you can do it now before we approve the agenda. And that's why that provision is there. Well, if not, then I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
So, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved and seconded. Pardon me?
Yes.
It's been moved and seconded that the agenda be approved as written. And of course, there is still another provision for adding something under other business if we choose to do so as we proceed through the meeting. So the agenda has been approved. Professor Hester, will you just go ahead and call the roll just for the record?
Okay. Dr. Moore?
Here.
Sonia Hester present. Dr. Thomas Miller?
Here.
Dr. Abdullahi? Attorney Castile?
Here.
Attorney Diamond?
Here.
Mr. Diamond?
Here.
Dr. Irvin? Dr. Marshall? Dr. Mills?
President.
Ms. Pickens? Dr. Ramirez? Dr. Ramirez, I'm sorry? Yes. Attorney Rutledge?
Here.
Dr. Samuels?
think Dr. Sanders, I spoke with him about these people being here short.
Thank you, Professor Hester. I forgot that you were an English teacher and shouldn't have had any problem with Abdullahi, and of course you didn't. So I appreciate that.
Dr. Bennett?
Yeah, sure.
Well, you know, I had trouble with that.
Very few,
We will move to item 4 on the agenda, which is the approval of the agenda, approval of the minutes of July 21st. Now here, the minutes were mailed to everyone, and so we don't read them. It's my desire not to read them at the meeting, but to trust that you have read them already, and so we can act on the minutes. So we'll entertain a motion regarding the minutes. If there are corrections, you can also make that as a part of your motion. Yes. I really would like to come one day when we refer to everybody as professors, but we gotta wait to go with that. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Oh, professor.
Instead of doctor.
Oh, professor.
It should be professor.
Okay, so the motion then should read, then approve with the noted correction. I guess the recorder is picking that up. It's been moved and seconded. Those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposal? Then the motion carries. We will now proceed to item 5 on the agenda, which I refer to as protocol on responding to applications and nominations. And I just have a word to say about that. Some of us might get applications directly rather than coming to the president's office, which is where they should come. If we get them, then our responsibility is to acknowledge that application, because we don't want people out there hanging. So we acknowledge the application with a note that is being forwarded to the to Ms. Merrick. And in that way, everything will be in order. But if we simply forward it to her without acknowledging it, then we create a hole. And I'm sure all of you know that, but I thought it was appropriate that you be reminded so that we won't have potential applicants complaining about they didn't get a response from a person. And that's all I had about protocol. If there's anything else that should be noted about that, then I believe it would be appropriate to say that at this time. Okay, that doesn't require a motion of any type, but I just wanted to remind the members of the committee of that. Now, here's in item 6, what I wanted to do here is to give the members an opportunity on the committee to state if they have had the occasion to publicize the announcement individually. And I thought this would be an appropriate opportunity to do so. I'll begin that so that you'll have some idea of what I'm speaking of. For example, shortly after the announcement appeared on the system website, I took that announcement and I placed it on Facebook. I also sent it to several persons that I knew are persons that at various universities that might know candidates. And that was the extent of my publicizing the announcement. And I'd like to hear if some of the other persons have had the occasion to do something like that, any type of contact you might have made with persons who could either nominate an individual, persons who might have been interested in the position. Anyone?
Yes, sir. I had opportunity to.
Yeah.
I had opportunity to reach out to several individuals in our area and get the information disseminated through talking to various persons, and they forwarded the information that was placed in the queue. And also, we sent, Professor Pickens and I sent a campus-wide email for Southern University of Shreveport and asked that our Director of University Relations would assist us in disseminating that information throughout the community and throughout the region for others who may be interested in the position. So we've begun utilizing our tentacles to make sure that the information is available to those who are interested. Thank you.
Anyone else? Is there anyone else who has had the opportunity to do that? Well, I think that might be something that we might want to consider, because we have to make this a very assertive process of seeking candidates. Now, one of the things is we'll probably have a better handle on exposure. Ms. Mary, could you give, I have this somewhere else down at item 8. And so if I might at this time, just bypass the discussion of candidates and go to item 8 on the agenda. Could you sort of bring us up to date on that?
Absolutely, Dr. Moore. It's okay. Thank you. We have done our due diligence with the Office of Human Resources to get the announcements publicized beyond the campus websites. So if you'll notice, they should be on the campus website, as Professor Hester noted, along with the system website. It's probably placed out there. And it's also on the HR website for the system as well. Now, we do have an absolute link to the search. So I think many of you had an opportunity to take a look at that. It's sus.edu/EVAAP is how it's listed. I'm sorry, EVPAAP is how it's listed on the website. In addition, we've reached out rather to the Advocate newspaper here in Baton Rouge, the Chronicle of Higher Education, as well as diverse issues in higher ed. Most of those will have an online presence. The Advocate will have an actual printed presence as well as an online presence for that one. We were slightly delayed in getting those out. We met our deadline. The deadline for this committee set for July 31st in terms of being in touch with these news outlets. However, we needed to get the budget loaded such that we could make the payment on the advertisement rates. Many of these outlets don't allow placement of ads without payment up front. So we're taking care of that pretty quickly to get that in place. So be on the lookout for this Sunday's Advocate, for the Advocate publication and the online pieces that we have already gone forward for the Chronicle and diverse issues. It is, yes. And check the date on that. I think it was supposed to go live in diverse over the weekend.
Are they present already? Because I've been looking for it. I thought the Advocate might have been a little early, but you've explained.
We need a prepayment on
Right,
that.
right.
And also, Dr. Moore, I'd like to add, not for the purposes of this committee's concern, but just so that you know, we were trying to maintain a very conservative budget as it relates to advertising, and print advertising is very expensive, particularly in the Chronicle of Higher Education. So we opted to go the online route, which is substantially less expensive. And talking to Professor Hester and Dr. Moore, in consultation with the two of them, we agreed that we would go the online route for those that were a little bit less costly for us to do. So that's what we're experiencing. So I think we're gonna spend totally about less than $1,000. I'm sorry, it should be about 1,200 total between the three outlets. And that's a far cry from what Attorney Rutledge mentioned in our first meeting about what those costs were to keep these types of aids out there.
Thank you. Are there any comments regarding this?
I'd just like to ask Ms. Merritt if HR and SUNO got any information about this position,
I think they did, but I can follow up to be certain.
because I haven't seen anything from them. That's not, that's part of the course for SUNO, where IT is a problem, has problems. But I don't remember seeing, I got email from Dr. Moore, 2 emails from him, but I didn't see anything from HR.
Mr. Pusher, would you care to comment on
Yeah, I
that?
think we put it on the SUS broader. Advertising. I don't know that it would appear anywhere. It's out. And if you'd like, I can sure.
Yeah, that might be a good idea, because there might be some pseudo candidate, persons there who might be interested in the position.
Take care.
Thank you.
I just throw out, shut up the survey. We as faculty senate, from the faculty senate, our various campuses can send word out to our faculty, now to the faculty.
Thank you. Okay, if we now look at number 7, I had some concern about how we would deal with that at the meeting, because this is an open meeting. And of course, I think the things that we could discuss are things that might be handled in an open meeting. But if there are negative things to be said about a candidate, I'm apprehensive about doing that in an open meeting because of various privacy issues. I certainly don't think that negative things should go out of this room about a candidate. Now, I'm confident that the integrity of this committee is that we wouldn't do that under any circumstance, even if we remain where we are now. I know we got a bunch of attorneys around the table, and who can keep us straight on that. Right, Professor Diamond?
Are we going to make this distinction between applicants and candidates? Or applicants and
Well, people in general right now, at some point, well, I call them candidates. Maybe that's the wrong terminology, but people who are being considered for those final 3 that we will submit to the President and Chancellor. And you might have all kinds of people in there. There may be people who have not applied, but who've been nominated. Well, certainly they are not candidates, but I put this item on the agenda because I didn't think it would be appropriate for us to be forced into making last-minute decisions about people that we might support individually based on the criteria. You know, not based on our gut level feeling, but based on the criteria as advertised. I just think the more we talk about it, the better position we will be in at the final analysis to say, well, gee, Dr. Miller had a point that I didn't think of, and it sort of changes the direction I'd like to go with my final 3. And we have to do that in a discussion. And I think there's value in that, and that's why I have it on the agenda at this point, very early in the game. Ms. Merrick, what kind of timeline are we talking about now?
27th.
When the chancellor wants 3 names.
We were hoping to have the 3 names to the chancellor in enough time that it can be presented for the September board meeting.
Okay.
The September board meeting is the last Friday in September, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry, 23rd? 25th, okay, so we're looking at September 25th as the date for that. However, the board package is typically assembled about 10 days prior to that, or at least disseminated to the board 10 days prior to that. So he would need that information in enough time such that he can submit it 10 days prior to. So we essentially have about a month from today. If I had to give you
I believe at the last meeting, had we not said that it would be September?
I think we did.
Last time.
We did say September 8th. I think, well, I think at least that pinpoints it to what we need to do in the time frame we are working with.
I had with this sort of search, the search actually for President Chancellor. And there was some discussion about the applicants, the applications that were coming in before we made a decision as to which ones should be seriously considered. And I think once we made that determination, and probably some of our legal committee members could make the point a little more precisely, but I think at the point that we decided that here was a pool of applicants that meet the basic criteria for consideration, we contacted the applicants, informed them that we were going to recommend that their names be moved forward for consideration, and then went from that point to actually discussing individual applicants. Is that more or less?
But we arrive at that point, don't we, by having some discussion? If I'm hearing you correctly?
Of individual applicants?
Right.
It wasn't how it was handled last time. I don't know whether it was well for the president chancellor. I don't know whether that was a better approach or not.
I think in part the issue was in terms of the whole public discussion about an applicant. And I think we made the distinction the last time that an applicant is not subject to public records review. So the concern from the first search committee that we had for president and then president chancellor is that every time an applicant submitted his or her application or a nomination was made, that was made public. The second go around, we made a distinction legally, as I understand it, that until a person became an actual candidate, not just an applicant, that information could remain private and was not subject to public scrutiny. It doesn't mean we can't discuss it, but I would defer to our HR department that if we're going to have a personnel discussion, I probably would want to do it, also see the webcam there. So it's not on, okay. I'd be just a little careful about having that sort of public discussion, depending, Mr. Chair, on how much detail. But from a legal perspective, the distinction was made as long as a candidate is just, and a person is just an applicant as opposed to a candidate, that person's name or their information did not need to be released to the public.
Whether the person is an applicant or a candidate seems to be a little far ahead when we haven't gotten out the advertisement yet. Well, we have, and according to what Ms. Merrick says, there are times when it has been out. Is that correct? Okay. But then we need time to get the people's package in, and that takes more time. And what I'm suggesting here is that before we consider an application or an applicant or a candidate, that we consider the amount of material that we have to determine whether that person can either be an applicant, he's put in his paperwork.
Yeah, well, at this point, Ms. Merrick, I think we have 2 full applications, is that right? Three full applications. And those were the ones that I had reference to. Now, I understand fully what you're saying, and if the committee wants to go in that direction and not do anything today, then that's fine. Maybe we would need to go back and review them carefully. I have no problem with that, and certainly I want to abide by the best interest of the committee, but we do want to be efficient in meeting that, is it still September the 8th? Deadline.
That's the problem that I have.
We want to be prepared to meet that deadline. That's gonna determine the number of meetings that we need to have in order to get to that process. I mean, in order to get to that goal. And so that's where we are now, yes.
I suggest we take advantage of when we are together here to do the best we can
Yeah.
to move forward. It's hard to get together face to face and things like that. So let's take advantage of the time we have together and maximize rather than delay. This is the really opportune time.
Well, how do you wish to proceed today? As I said, we have 3 complete applications. There is one person who was nominated who refused to withdrew. That's correct. And I believe there's another person who has been nominated, but I haven't received application material from that person. And so that's where we are now. I'm leaning toward Professor Abdullahi, and will be guided by what you want to do at this point.
If we do that, we're going to have to get into their credentials, and then, like you said, it's going to be a private, you know what I mean? If it's an open, we're going to have to make the determination whether or not these are candidates, or considered to be candidates, or applicants, whatever. But we're going to have to talk about the credentials. So are we prepared to do that today? I am. But I don't know about, the whole public-private, discussion.
We could always go in closed session, which is an option that Ms. Merrick and I talked about briefly this morning, if we want to do so.
Just by way of reminder, with our last search for president and chancellor, once we decided on a slate of 6 and wanted to make those public, that's when they became candidates. Up until then, the entire pool, they were all just simply considered applicants. So everyone we get now is simply considered an applicant. And I do not believe that they're subject, based on our previous interpretation of the law, that they would be subject to public review. So we could discuss them if you wanted to privately. I'm not really sure the value, frankly, of having a discussion of 3 if we're expecting to have more come in. Frankly, I think it may either put someone at an advantage or disadvantage. Frankly, I'd rather have all that we're going to have a deadline, and if there are 10 candidates, review all of those 10 and compare them, and then come up with a number that we decide that we want to either interview or submit as a list of candidates, depending on the process. My hesitation, I'll just say, is that we've got 3 folks here. We get 5 or 6 others, but we're just discussing these 3. And unless we're just going to say objectively, well, this person doesn't meet an objective criteria and kick them out, I'm not really sure the value of any sort of in-depth discussion about just 3 applicants at this point.
Okay,
I agree.
with regard to the deadline, you should keep in mind that the announcement itself says review will continue until a candidate is found, or whatever the language is. So we have to make a decision internally what that deadline is going to be now, because that's already out there, that the review will continue. But we know we could have a working deadline, which I don't guess that is illegal, is it, Attorney Castillo? A working deadline which will say that we will stop. So it's sort of contradictory to what we've already published, but we do have to have some kind of working framework just for.
Yeah, I would propose that we have our own sort of deadline, because right now, I guess conceivably, if we went along this path of this sort of rolling review, we could take a candidate and find someone and say, we like this candidate, that's the ideal person, and submit that to the president. I'm not sure that that's what we're hoping to get at. I think we're hoping to get the best pool possible, maybe call them down, then ultimately make a decision. But I defer to you, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the process. I know we said it would be rolling, but I think we're going to be challenged.
We know what the target is now. The target date is. We know that that's September 8th, right? To give the chancellor, the president, time to get it on the September board agenda. So whatever we do, we have to do it within that time frame, and that should help us to establish committee meetings and what's going to be the goal of those committees. And I too don't like a lot of unnecessary meetings, mainly because of people from Shreveport have to come. Now, I don't count the people from New Orleans, but it's a nice cruise, whatever. But that becomes a problem and a challenge. What can we do between now and September the 8th? And we're depending on, hopefully, an influx of applications at some point after they've been publicized. What can we do now? And I'm open for suggestions on how we proceed with that.
Yeah. I was thinking that we are making independent assessment of each applicant independent of other applications, and making an assessment and scoring, and then later on come back and do comparative or whatever the analysis that needs to be done. Similar to the way we conduct classes and so on and so forth. Scoring. It's just that I think we have to do an independent assessment of the application. So with that said, it doesn't really matter whether you get all of them in one time or over a period of time, because at the end you come back and look at the scores, and then you do a comparison and weakness and so on and so forth. So I guess the scheme of evaluation comes into answering the question of whether you get all the applications in to conduct your assessment, or you can move ahead and independently assess each one.
Well, we could do the independent assessment, but that's gonna require some dynamics to take place, because you see, we got less than a month to do everything, right? 27 days or thereabout to do everything, and so. Right, but he's saying on an individual basis, but we Mr. Rutledge, Attorney Rutledge.
Did we in fact, Ms. Merrick or Mr. Chairman, place a deadline for the return of any applications in the advertisement?
No.
I didn't think we did.
No, we said until filled.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that. The next thing I want to caution us, if this search is going to have any credibility, it's going to need to be conducted in such a way that we allow optimally for individuals to learn about the opening, have an opportunity to consider whether or not they wish to apply for it, and to give this committee an appropriate amount of time to evaluate those applicants and make a recommendation to President Chancellor. Now, one of the things, many things that he said at the last meeting was, ideally, I would like to put this thing to rest timely. And I do think he did reference September. But I also remember him saying that I don't want to impose upon you, and he didn't use these words specifically, but he said as much, I don't want to impose an artificial deadline on you in an attempt to meet that deadline. We don't conduct a full, thorough search that will, again, optimally allow for the best candidate to emerge in that process. So I'd like for us to be able to do it timely, but having just conducted a search, been a part of a search committee that resulted in Dr. Belton's selection, I know it's very difficult to turn around that kind of a process in the timeline that we're talking about. So I just think we need to keep that in the forefront and be flexible going forward. And lastly, I think that that's going to largely be driven by the number of applicants we receive, let's say over the next 2 to 3 weeks, as well as the quality of the applicants that we receive over the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
If I'm looking at my calendar here, and today being the 11th of August, Tuesday, we gave ourselves 3 weeks to optimally allow for any applicants to make application. We would then need to interview those applicants. We called them down and said, look, we want 6 of them to come in for an interview. To get to 3, I think we're looking at the 28th saying, here's kind of our internal FAR deadline. Look at those applicants and then invite some to be interviewed. We use the same process as the last time. Let's say 6. We'd interview those 6 and get down to 3. Now, if we're going to make the recommendation of just 1 person, then it's 3, then 1. But that's the sort of deadline I think we're looking at. One of, we've got to say internally, here's our FAR deadline. We're going to make a selection, invite those folks in, interview them, and then make a recommendation to the president. 4 weeks.
What's that date specifically?
I would say that given that today is the 11th, that Friday the 28th, which happens to be the board meeting, the next Southern board meeting, we could meet that day, August 28th.
I'm thinking September 20th.
And with a goal of getting to September 25th, working backwards, given that today is August 11th, we're trying to reach a deadline of September 8th to be able to make a recommendation to Dr. Belton, correct?
Yes.
So what I'm suggesting is that if we gave ourselves 1, 2.5 weeks until August 28th to say, look, this is our internal deadline to get enough of a pool of applicants to review. Let's say we get 10 of those, we meet, we decide from that pool, whatever number, let's say it's 10, and then decide that we want to invite from that pool a certain number. Let's say that number is 6. We would invite those 6 to be interviewed by this committee. And then after interviewing them, we would make recommendations from that pool of 6 that we've interviewed to the president. Perhaps 3 candidates that he can then say, of those 3, I recommend 1 to the board on September 25th to be considered and approved.
I feel pretty good about it. I thought you were going in a different direction, which is going to ask the president to change his deadline, but that's not what you're doing.
No.
And so that makes sense. You have crafted a plan of action that will allow us to meet the deadline, but it's going to require work. Yes, Professor Dyer.
Well, you could do it the week of August 3rd, yes, August 31st, that would work. And so the deadline would be August 28th, that we say internally, you've got to have your application in if you want us to consider it. And the week of August 31st, we would literally meet and decide on 6. If we get bored enough to choose 6, we choose 6 and then contact those 6 and say, look, you've made this, whatever we call it, semifinals of 6. And then from those 6, we then invite them in, we interview them, and from those 6, choose 3, using the same process which we used last time. And then refer those to the president. And the president, from those 3, it's now his decision to make a selection from those 3 finalists, if you will, that he would recommend to the board. He could either choose to recommend one candidate, or he could choose to refer all 3 of them to the board. I think ideally, he would prefer to take from those 3 and make a recommendation of one person to the board for consideration and approval. Sure.
And that's the second week.
President,
Yes, ma'am.
so for clarity, we're saying August the 28th, you close the application.
Correct.
August the 31st, interview should take place. Is that what we're saying?
August 31st, we would have to meet and call them down to 6.
Sure.
And then after that meeting on the 31st, we would then have Ms. Merrick contact those 6, we'll call them semifinalists. That's what we did last time. Contact the 6 semifinalists for an interview. And then we would meet with those 6 semifinalists and interview them. We could choose September the 4th. And then on September the 4th, just using that day, we'd interview 6, and from those 6, we would choose 3. We'd contact those 3, or have the president contact those 3. He may want to interview them privately, or whatever he wants to do from there, to then make a selection of those 3 on one single candidate that he can recommend to the board.
Another question, and forgive the question in advance. Is it absolutely necessary that these persons be made public at all until the final person is chosen?
Well, and I'd have to defer to the university's council, which I am not. The one distinction that I've heard is that this is a committee appointed by the president,
Right.
as opposed to where we were a committee of the board with the president search. And it's my understanding that there is a distinction. And I would defer to legal counsel because I don't want to give this committee any legal advice since I'm not the university's counsel. But I've heard along the way that it is not necessary to do so because we are a committee appointed by the president as opposed to one appointed by the board. But I would seek clarification.
Thank you.
If a member of the press finds out and insists though, then somebody's going to have to respond to that because
Sure.
they are, as you know, they're going to claim the right to information and we see it all the time.
Sure.
They're being taken to court because of that. But we don't have to announce, we are not compelled to announce it as a committee. But if pressure is put on the university to know who the candidates are, then somebody else has to make that decision, as you suggested, as to how we proceed with that. Yes.
Dr. Moore, it's my understanding to echo what Attorney Castillo just said. He is correct in how they explained that to us going into the formulation of this committee. And then from that, it is also our understanding that the person for which Dr. Belton will ultimately recommend to the board, that person at that time will become public when it goes to the board in the board package.
Well, that's okay because at that time,
It's just that one.
at that time, the agreement's going to be made.
Correct.
I mean, well, if he's going to recommend a person to the board, then the basic agreement's been made. By the way, that was not just an out of thin air question by Professor Hester, because
I think it's safe to assume that there might be a candidate who might not want his candidacy or her candidacy publicly known. So that's what's driving that. And I think it's a very good question in that regard. But we can proceed with your suggestion on how we handle that. And of course, if we get 5, we still go with 5 instead of 6.
Right.
If that were the case, I'm just.
And similarly, taking into consideration what Attorney Rutledge just said, if we feel that we don't have an adequate pool, I think we should confer with President Belton and say, here's what we have so far. And maybe we do need more time. But that'll be his call. But at least we have a schedule that we know that we're working with, and we will endeavor to try to meet those deadlines. But if we don't feel like, and the president doesn't feel like we're yielding the proper pool, then we would be flexible enough to make adjustments based on his suggestion and recommendation.
And so I have a question, and perhaps there's no legal problem here. So I like the idea, however, search is open until filled. So what happens just by chance if the president moves forward with to the board and the very next day Robin gets an application? We're just at that point done and we just can't review it.
Sure.
And it's a better application.
It's kind of like what you would do in your own job. So that if someone submits an application deadline, and we might.
But we have no deadline. That's the only problem, I'm seeing with it, that we made a decision not to place a deadline on it.
Well, many universities do that today. And it's filled when we say it's filled.
Okay, that's good.
But I do, and I want to take just about a half minute for an editorial comment. I think that this position is probably one of the more important non-presidential positions that this institution has made or will make. And so in that regard, I do think we should be looking at the highest form of quality. Now, as I said, I put editorial before that, so it's my view. I don't think that we should submit 6 mediocre candidates. Now, and I can say that in the strongest possible terms. I don't think we should do that. It would be an embarrassment to us and anybody else if we were to do that.
Yeah, further add to that. Yes, the same would be true with 3 or 1. It may be that after we go through this process, going to your point of rolling, I think that's the value of it, is that we might end up 3-4 weeks from now and just say, because this is one of the most important decisions this university will make in terms of leadership, that we look at the applicants and say, we still don't have the person that's going to lead this campus and be the number system. And I think we've got to give ourselves that ability that if someone comes along, that the president certainly should reserve the right to say, look, this committee has gone through a process and the superstar has come along after that process and have the ability to make that adjustment. I think we're here to provide him guidance and advice and suggestions, but it's a critical hiring decision.
Yeah, very good. Any other comments? So we're going to table this idea of discussing candidates based on all of the recommendations that have been made and not deal with that today. Yes, Professor Mills.
I agree with most of what you were saying, but specifically with this lady over here. The problem that we have when we first met with the Chancellor, the presidents of the Faculty Senate, as well as the Vice President too, he stated that he would like it to be done by September. He didn't say he wants it to be done by September. So therefore, if we were to for additional time, because of the problems that we're faced with, he might give it to us.
I think you're correct, because very few highly qualified people, if he makes the appointment, going to be able to leave and get here for October the 1st, or even October the 15th. That's just the way it goes. And so your point is a very good one, but we want to see what we can do to satisfy what the President Chancellor has asked us to do. And we can always revert to the other options that you are discussing now. Okay. Well, I think we've covered 8 and 9, and now we are down to 10. And by the way, I'm a strong advocate of a 1-hour meeting, but I didn't expect this to be one. And I didn't expect it to be one because this is too important. But I used to carry out that practice when I was chief academic officer of this campus. And you know, presiding over a group of deans, I could never keep the 1-hour deadline.
You didn't start on time.
You may still be within that hour.
Well, that's going to be hard, but I'm just saying, my experience in presiding over deans, where everybody's got an opinion that's very strong, it's kind of hard to meet that 1-hour deadline. But I appreciate the input that you've made in a very efficient way. Dr. Miller, you want to say a word about this?
I think I can be very brief. This is the instrument that was used to evaluate candidates for the President Chancellor search. And the various criteria were worked out by matching up or looking at the advised position and making sure that all key points that we were looking for in terms of candidates were reflected in this shape. So I actually went through the advertisement that's in place for the Executive Vice President of Academic Affairs and Provost, and I find that we have a pretty close match. I think that everything, all of the 12 categories that are in, or 12 criteria that are in this instrument, or reflect points that are in the advertisement itself. And I can go through them if you like.
Well, what's the opinion of the committee at this time? There are 1 or 2 there that, well, one of them, a criterion that I placed in the recommended modifications. And for example, had something to do with creating a culture of scholarship and grantsmanship. Now that was put in after we began the process.
I would.
And it might already be there, but I feel so strongly about that because if we don't get that push from the provost's office, then faculty are not going to feel as accountable. Vice President Pusho, if it's just coming from the grants office. Because you see, there's no stream of faculty accountability to the grants person. And so that push has to come from the provost. And I'd like to know if this individual is going to meet that and is going to be committed to that.
But 6A and B
might be.
Yeah. 6. Well, funding is.
Well, when I see that, I see under funding mechanism, I see things related to the Board of Regents as well as the legislature and how we are funded and being sensitive to that and all of those things that go along with funding, such as the GRAD Act and stuff like that.
I think I can answer your question in this way, and that is that We had some discussion about including in one of the criteria something that addressed specifically grant writing and such. And I believe that was included in the more general heading of institutional advancement.
Well, yeah, it could be there.
And I think we.
Yeah, it could be there.
First committee decided to stick with more general language.
But Dr. Moore, in his email, which I read, was very emphatic about this whole concept of not only grant writing, but the importance of the academic vice president and provost to relate. Now, I don't remember exactly your email that you sent, but you have just repeated it. And we haven't, I don't see it here.
You see, the point, one of the points that I'm concerned about is that the Baton Rouge campus, this position is, I think the president used 75% Baton Rouge campus, 75%. This campus, and to some degree the New Orleans campus, I don't know where New Orleans is with respect to graduate programs, but this campus has 7 PhD programs right now. And with that goes scholarship. How can you run a program if your faculty is not publishing? How can you run a PhD program if your faculty is not going after external funds? Not the kind of Attorney Castillo that we refer to when we deal with funding here. And that in the long run, I think will hurt us if we don't have somebody who's going to provide the push. You know, I don't say you what do you do when you get in somebody else's business? What do you call that? Day-to-day management, micromanagement. I'm not talking about micromanagement, but I'm talking about.
We can easily add another criteria.
Yeah, so you got me off on one of those emotional sidetracks that I didn't want to get off on. But anyway. Okay.
What would that be, Professor Moore?
Well, as long as we take care of it under, if you omit that, if you don't put that there, then you're making a provost less than what he ought to be. You see, if you don't have that, certainly handling the funding is great because without the funding we don't survive. But having that in there, so we expect you to go out and get. In fact, the president, chancellor said it yesterday. You remember, well, those of you who were here, he said something to the effect of going out and getting funding. We got in the mode of talking about how badly faculty needs raises here, and then he talked about those responsibilities that the faculty would have, and of course that went a lot of different directions. But I thought that was so important that it should be here.
May I offer an amendment to the rubric then?
Yeah.
Dr. Miller, instead of adding a C under 6, can we change A to comprehensive understanding of funding mechanism and grants? We could add a C, but
I'm thinking instead of the mechanism that's good because you got to know, as a provost, you got to know how we get money on this campus through the state and through student tuition. We got to know that. But then there's another issue here which deals with having a faculty that is assertive enough to go out and get grants, and also that person being an advocate of incentives for the faculty. Now, I know you can't put all that in there. Incentives for the faculty, as well as this notion of cost effectiveness rebate, because that's what drives people to go after money. But in the long term, it's gonna contribute to the health of the university.
I think, but,
That's what I'm thinking.
I think,
I think you made the case better than anybody. As to why that's, I don't think it's a sub point under something else. I think that's a distinct category and asset that we need for my academic living.
Yeah. Well, we can take care of it. We need 3 people to volunteer to work on this. You can do it by email or text or some other huge piece of technology without having to come together to meet, to work with Dr. Miller, and let's get this done for the next time. Okay, we got the 3.
Might I also suggest one thing, Mr. Chairman, to Dr. Miller, because this tripped up some folks, last time he did it. There really is no use for the B, C, D, E, and F in the column. So I think you need to make that clear, because I stayed up all night trying to figure that out.
You can call me.
Yeah, I wanted to call somebody smarter than that was Professor Downs, so I called Preston, and he didn't know, so I didn't feel so bad. So please, you'll save somebody a sleepless night.
Yeah, go, Ms. Merrick.
We have a rating scale of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is incompatible with A, B, C, D, and E.
no, but A, B, C, D, and E is something completely.
Yes.
That is.
What is it?
Anonymity of the evaluation. That you could simply assign, if you want to do that, if you want to have an anonymous evaluation, you could simply assign. Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to offer an apology to Attorney Rutledge and Castile. That was something that, as Dr. Miller just pointed out, that was for the anonymity of the candidate. At the time, this was going to be a compilation sheet of all of the applicants. And so please disregard the A, B, C, D, and F. We would use that just to compile at the end. After all of you have made your assessments of each of the candidates, we were assigning each of them an alphabet to maintain their anonymity. And so that when we did discuss them, we would not necessarily divulge names, or the evaluator would not have to divulge his or her name. Does that help? Our apologies for that.
Okay, so we have 3 people. 3 people will do a little refinement to this. Marshall, Abdullahi, and Miller, and have it ready for the next meeting. So we're going to refine the rubric. And by the way, you can use email, to communicate with these 3 persons. If you want to have a suggestion that's not covered here.
So
Go ahead.
everyone has our email.
Right. We have a
And suggestion as well.
Absolutely, yes. We'll send you a list of the email addresses and telephone numbers and all the contact information. We can do that. Dr. Moore, I have a quick question, particularly as it relates to the committee working on their individual evaluations of the candidates. We are getting them slowly. I've gotten one since we've been in this committee meeting. Would you prefer that we share them with you as they come in? Although originally we talked about compiling them and sending them on a weekly basis, but since we've changed our timeline a little bit, would it be helpful to send them as we get them?
I think so, because we're working on a compressed calendar right now, and a week is a long time when you're working on that kind of compressed calendar. So if you can do it, we would appreciate it. Okay, we're ready to move to other business, and if there is no other business, then I can take consolation in saying that we finished in less than 90 minutes. We had down here a place for the chancellor, but he's unable to be. You can imagine how it is on this campus this week. So he's not able to be here. Are there any other questions, comments, or whatever? By the way, could we get those minutes sort of a little earlier, just so that people will know, be reminded of what's expected of them? That's great, thank you. Isn't it wonderful to work with such a cooperative group of people? There's no other business. We'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Yes. Well, how do we handle them? Well, if they come to you individually, then I suggested earlier that that person who receives it acknowledges the nomination. Always do that, and then transmit it to Ms. Merrick, and she'll take it from there. Yeah.
No, once the committee has received the nomination, so we receive this nomination, then what happens?
Well, transmit it to her, and she will notify the candidate that he or she has been nominated. For example, I can tell you the person here that nominated. I got a nomination from Dean Ramey. Probably a lot of you saw it because I think I shared it. And I responded to her in 30 minutes, just acknowledging it, and then proceeded to note. I think in that case, I notified the person being nominated. But you don't have to do that. They will do it if you don't. But I notified the person. And then I was through with it because I had responded professionally and quickly. And then the office takes care of the rest.
One additional thing, I think we might want to consider developing questions for that sit-down interview with candidates.
Yes.
And Mr. Beck, I believe we have a list of questions that we used in the last chancellor search.
We do. We have a question bank that we can share with you. We can use the questions that you use in this hour. Also, Dr. Moore, in response to Dr. Marshall's question about how we're communicating to the nominations, meaning the applicants as well, our candidates as well at this point, we can receive them through the website. They're coming to us from the website evpaap@sus.com, and they're forwarded to me from there. And then we're simply sending an acknowledgement back to let them know that we have received it, so that they know it's going to the community, from that point to be shared with the community. And as well as the nomination, we're letting the person who did the nomination know that, and also asking them to let that potential candidate know that they still need to send in a application. So we've not made contact with the prospective candidate, we asked the nominator to let them know that he's.
Now, another question.
Question about the evaluation rubric. Did we say a deadline for the corrections so that we can finalize the rubric?
We didn't set the deadline.
I see them.
Okay. So by what's Friday?
Friday.
14th.
We will forward this to you and Professor Hester, and then you can, I guess, distribute to the rest.
We can do that.
I think by Friday.
August 14th, right? Okay. For the 5th time, are there nominations for adjournment? Nominations, recommendation, a motion for. Okay, that's all we need. I don't think we need to vote on it. We don't need to vote on it.